All right, so now without any further ado, I'm going to invite Lisa to come up. Let's give Lisa a hand. Yeah.
I had my first drink when I was 3 years old. I don't remember it, but for years, every holiday, my family would tell this story and laugh. I'd go up to my grandma, give her a game token, and she in turn would give me a drink of her 7 and 7. I'd say, "Yum, Grandma, good," and they thought it was so cute, especially when I ran into walls. Hello, everyone. My name's Lisa, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and that was my introduction to alcohol and a messed up lifestyle. Thank you. It should be no surprise to hear that I'm in recovery for alcohol, drugs, and gambling. When I was in second grade, my family moved to from California to Oregon. One day, shortly after we moved, my dad was crying as he packed up his truck with all of his stuff. My parents just divorced, and my dad was experiencing a nervous breakdown due to my mom's infidelity. He needed to move away back to California for his mental health. So he moved, and my little brother Brandon and I stayed with our mom. The next 5 years of my life were totally dysfunctional. While my mom was making up for all of her missed partying days, going out a lot, and bringing home strange men, I felt like I was in survival mode most of the time. I often felt alone, unwanted, and rarely felt love from my mom. I wished I would have known God back then. Instead, unwanted attention came elsewhere. On different occasions between the ages of 9 and 19, I was sexually abused by a babysitter, my mom's boyfriend, and my uncle. Every time I stood up to them and told my mom what happened, only to be dismissed. Because my mom did not do anything about it when I told her, I felt more alone and unheard. And since no one was standing up for me, I had to learn to stand up for myself. I spent several nights with a knife under my bed to protect me and my little brother. I was scared and I hated my mom. I became shy and insecure. Fast forward to 7th grade and my first dance. I was still shy and insecure, and I turned to smoking pot for the first time. I felt like I had a sudden burst of personality fill my body, and it was the excuse that I needed to get out of my shy shell and become the life of the party. That summer, my mom moved us back to California to be near my family and my dad. Shortly after we moved, my mom met a man who soon became my stepdad. We liked him a lot, but he struggled with a drug habit he couldn't shake. He was dealing cocaine out of our home and attempted to sell it to my friends. Him and my mom fought constantly, and my brother and I felt like we were just in the way, so we ended up moving in with our dad. There was so much change in my life that I went to 4 different high schools, and I never really fit in anywhere. That drove me to extreme shyness and feeling like a loner, even spending most of my lunches hiding in the bathroom so nobody would see me eating alone. I ended up graduating early from high school, and I got a job in the accounting department where my mom worked. Being in a work environment helped me learn some self-confidence as I climbed the corporate ladder. At 19 years old, I moved back in with my mom, and we became partying buddies. We went to a local bar that my grandparents drank at for years, and my family and I got drunk and crazy together. Alcohol worked awesome for me. I was the party girl everywhere I went, always drinking too much, getting too wild. I did things I never would have done sober. Though embarrassed the next day, it didn't keep me from going back out the next night to do it all over again after a day at work. At the age of 20, I met my ex-husband, Louis. He was really good looking and had long hair, which was very important back then. He had a good job and a nice truck, but the biggest plus was that he liked to party too. We did cocaine together on the weekends and worked hard at our jobs during the week. He was really into exercising and eating healthy, but totally polluted his body on the weekends with drugs and alcohol. I knew he expected me to stay skinny and be that look-good girlfriend that made him look good. I didn't know any better, so we got married in 1993 in Las Vegas with about 100 guests attending. It was a big party, real shocker. Shortly after we married, Louis was introduced to meth. I remember feeling really scared, and I thought it was from the devil, but feeling left out that Louis was off doing without me, I decided to join him. Within 6 months, we were staying awake for 3 to 4 days at a time, and the only thing we looked forward to was doing drugs. Nothing else was fun anymore, and our lives were becoming a mess. But worse yet, our problems started to become obvious to others. So we both quit using and quit our good jobs to relocate to Grants Pass, only to relapse within a few weeks of moving. So we relocated again, this time to Portland, where luckily we both found good jobs, and I soon got pregnant with our first daughter, Elizabeth. And the thought of being up all night on drugs with a new baby just tore my heart out, so I quit. And thankfully, I never did cocaine or meth again. Thank you. Thank you. Once the partying was over, Lewis and I began drifting apart. He found fun in mountain bike riding, and I began to drink wine. I started with a bottle a night, which felt totally acceptable. The problem is once I started drinking, I didn't or would not stop. I lied about how much I drank, and I hid my drinking as much as possible. I thought I had it all under control by disguising my wine in a coffee cup or my daughter's sippy cups. Life felt doable so long as I had the wine to take the edge off, but Lewis began losing interest in me. He wanted the skinny, blonde California girl back, and now I was a heavier mom who never felt good enough. The more rejected I felt, the more I drank, and the worse our marriage got. Depressed, I drank more and more. I was now 29 years old and checking myself into my first treatment center. I stayed sober for a year before getting pregnant with my second daughter, Madison. That year in sobriety, that first year, was like learning how to be an adult for the first time. I quit drinking, but all of my problems I had been ignoring were all still there, and I had to learn new coping skills like attending and sharing at meetings, as well as working with a sponsor, and I needed God. I questioned God's existence my entire life. I wanted to believe in him, but I felt I needed more proof other than someone telling me he existed. My sponsor challenged me to pray as if I did believe in him, and I prayed to God, for God to open my eyes and reveal himself to me. And God did begin to show me he was real through people and situations. And as a result, I joined a church where I was able to be myself and not feel judged because the pastor and his wife were both recovering alcoholics too. I got baptized and became very involved on the management team and as a women's ministry leader, where I led Bible studies and others to Christ, and it seemed like things were turning around. After 5 years, I thought I was cured, and I slowly began putting everything else in my life ahead of my recovery program. My bookkeeping business tripled. We had our third daughter, Hannah, and we moved to Dundee, which more than doubled our living expenses. Moving away from my support system and our church was a very bad decision in the beginning of my downfall. I began drinking again and slowly started convincing myself and Lewis that I can control my drinking now. The more successful we looked on the outside, the more insecure and worthless I felt on the inside. Once again, alcohol took away all those feelings. I began drinking around the clock thinking no one knew. I started playing video poker as an escape, and it sucked me in like a vacuum. During a 6-month period, I sold my bookkeeping business for $60,000 and gambled all that money away. I gained 60 pounds. Lewis started dating my girlfriend and bringing her around my daughters and to our church. And it was at this time in 2008 that the consequences of my gambling had gotten so great I became suicidal. My life was falling apart, and my family thought it would be best for my girls and I to relocate to Idaho to catch my breath. While living in Idaho, Lewis and I went through a nasty 2-year divorce and custody battle. And although those 2 years were a blur, I do know I was hell-bent on making him suffer for giving up on me. But in 2010, the girls and I moved back to Sherwood, Oregon. This was where Lewis and I used to live when I had my act together. And now I was a divorced, overweight, and a mess, but was offered a part-time bookkeeping job at my old church. They requested I quit smoking cigarettes because it didn't look good. And that, coupled with the fear of running into Lewis and my old friends, made me want to isolate and hide. Now I was gambling every chance I could get to escape my life, and the more I won, the worse my addiction grew. I gambled after payday thinking I would only play a little video poker, and within hours I was drunk, ordering Domino's pizza for my kids' dinner, and I'd ended up gambling away my entire paycheck. I got several payday loans only to lose that money too. As a result, I began stealing money from the church with every intention on paying it back. The amount of money I owed to them began to grow so much that I was worried it was more than I could pay back. I felt such shame, but yet I couldn't stop. I was stuck, and I didn't feel I could pray to God because of what I was doing to him. Several times I contemplated praying to Satan for a big win to get me out of trouble, but thankfully I never did. Talk about feeling desperate. I couldn't tell anyone I was stealing from the church and the people I loved so dearly. I felt alone, extremely helpless, and suicidal. In 2011, I ended up getting caught for stealing. I was fired. I was asked to apologize to the congregation with a letter, and now everyone knew my secret, and I was horrified. Sherwood is a small town, and gossip travels fast. Everywhere I went, I hung my head in shame, and I hoped I didn't run into anyone I knew. Nothing I could ever do or say could make this situation okay. Even my kids felt embarrassed and rejected because of my actions. They were having a hard time through the divorce too, but I was so consumed with my own crap to pay attention to them. I was spiraling downward. I got another bookkeeping job with a construction company in Hillsborough and tried really hard to clean up my act, but the shame was so consuming that it felt like I was in a fog. It didn't take long for me to start stealing from them too. My plan was to just keep going until the police came and got me. I didn't see any end in sight and was just waiting to get busted, so all this would just stop. I did get caught, but this time it was for a lot more money, and now I was facing serious prison time. Just when I thought it couldn't get much worse, it did. My oldest daughter was acting out and ran away, and when we found her, Lewis and I put her in a youth behavioral facility in Corvallis. One weekend, I drove down to visit her, and on the way, I stopped to have lunch. And after 3 glasses of wine, I ended up gambling away all the money I had for the weekend. I started driving to see my daughter anyway, hoping I would figure something out. About 5 miles down the freeway, I started coughing uncontrollably, and I couldn't catch my breath, and I blacked out. I rolled my vehicle through the center divider and 3 lanes of oncoming traffic. The witnesses said they couldn't believe I was alive. I am thankful I didn't hit anyone or have my girls in my car. Amazingly, the only injuries I had were scrapes and bruises that were discovered after the ambulance transported me to Salem Hospital. A police officer came to the hospital and cited me for DUI. I went home completely numb mentally and emotionally, and off to treatment I went for the 4th time. It was there that I found out I'd be going to prison, and rather than stay there to sober up, I decided to leave and get drunk. As a result, Lewis moved the girls in with him, and I was at the lowest I'd been in my life. In 2012, I was sentenced to prison for 21 months for 7 felonies. Feeling completely broken, prison brought me to my knees. I felt rejected by God, and I was forced to sit in my feelings and my insecurities without numbing myself with alcohol. Even though I felt like I didn't deserve another chance, I prayed to God my first week in prison, asking if he would give me another chance and help me live for him. It was so hard praying in the beginning, but I knew there was no other way out except for Jesus. And I dove into his word, and I begged him to help me restore my life and show me how to live for him. I held firm to God's promises and his word. I didn't believe I deserved forgiveness, but I was willing to trust God, and I was determined to use this terrible experience to glorify him somehow. I began attending every Christian church service I could, and I kept busy tutoring and helping other inmates get their GED. I started running again, and I lost 80 pounds. I think I learned patience and contentment for the first time in my life. And I put myself into a very intensive 6-month treatment program where I learned how to work through victimization issues, along with recovery tools that still help me keep sober today. I worked hard at keeping a connection with my daughters who were ages 7, 11, and 16. Thankfully, Lewis and my family brought them to visit me each week, and I did my best to be the kind of mother that they needed me to be. No more empty words, they needed action. Christian volunteers in prison spoke truth to me. They refused to let me listen to the lies I believed. I came to them like a little kid asking for guidance and wisdom in every aspect of my life. They helped me form a plan and assured me that I was still loved by God no matter what I did. They reintroduced me to Jesus, and he saved my life. They showed me how to worship boldly, with confidence, and with everything I've got. They helped me walk with my head held high, with confidence again, because I'm a daughter of the one true King. They continuously reminded me that shame is something that the devil uses to keep me from God and living my best life. And because of their deep love and care, I felt excited about my future for the first time. I was released from prison on May 23rd, 2014, and moved to a halfway house. Honestly, it was harder to walk out of prison than to walk in it. Rebuilding my life was going to be a long road, and I was terrified of what others were going to say or think, and I struggled every day to keep my chin up. I made significant changes in my life, and I wanted everything to just magically fall into place now that I was out. Not being able to be with my girls was the hardest, but people needed time to trust me again, and I needed time to work on myself some more. Doing the next right thing and trusting God was what I held on to. Thankfully, I got a bookkeeping job working for an ex-parole officer who believed in second chances. Totally God. Within 6 months, I had my driver's license back, a car, and an apartment within 3 miles of my girls. And things were not perfect, but they were getting better. I still fought shame and the lies that I'm unworthy, so I hid at my new church and in my community. I even sat in the back of the bleachers at my kids' sporting events. Due to my record, I was also unable to volunteer at my girls' school, which was hard for them to understand, as I had always helped, and now I couldn't because of my past. Then, about 5 years after my release, God started really speaking loudly to me. I knew God wanted me to reach out to my previous pastor. We had talked since I was released from prison, and he wanted to welcome me back to the church if I'd be willing to let him use my story in a sermon. Prior to that, my heart was not in the right position because I was still embarrassed. I didn't want to reopen those wounds when I already felt I had dealt with them, but now God was telling me to do it, and regardless of my feelings. As I obeyed, my heart shifted, and I felt a responsibility to do what he was asking. Though it was still hard and very embarrassing, it felt like an honor now, especially when I ended up making amends and giving my testimony at that church on Easter of 2020. And that was just the beginning. I now have my Department of Corrections volunteer badge and have been back into prison as a volunteer serving for the same church I stole from 10 years prior. When inmates see a fellow inmate walk back in and share hope, it puts a light back into their eyes. God not only restored and continues to restore my relationships and my life, but he is using it to glorify him and to help others. His fingerprints are all over my road to redemption. Then something pretty radically changed inside me during the summer of 2020. God gave me confidence and boldness to share my struggles publicly to help others. When I first walked out of prison, all I wanted to do was just make better choices and forget any of this ever happened. But the Holy Spirit was telling me I did not go through all this recovery to sit back and just be silent. I've done a lot of work, and it isn't about my sin anymore. It's about God's grace and his redemption. He put a fire in me that did not come from me, you guys. All out of this has birthed a Celebrate Recovery at my church and back in our town. I really love Celebrate Recovery because we can come as we are, sins and all, talk about Jesus freely and unashamed, and have a true forever family that will support and encourage my recovery. Sharing my sins are hard, but sharing our struggles allows others to see how awesome God is. My faith is growing the more of myself I give to God. I believe God has blessed me from that obedience. He has showed me that I am worthy, forgiven, and loved. One of the ways he has done this is by bringing me a man who loves and follows God. We're engaged to be married. We've started a business, and we're preparing for our life together. Thank you. At the center. God is truly amazing, and his promises are true. And I'd like to leave you with some scripture. These scriptures continue to show me how to trust Jesus more than the world screaming around me. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. And Proverbs 3:5-6, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. God truly is good.